I stood at my son's doorstep, clutching the last birthday gift I would ever try to give him. His house was quiet, too quiet for a home with 2 young children. I knocked 3 times, hoping for a warm welcome, a hug, anything that would remind me that I was still his mother. The gift was wrapped in bright blue paper with a bow I had tied myself that morning. When the door cracked open, his eyes, cold and emotionless, met mine. "Not today, Mom," he muttered, starting to close the door. I caught a glimpse of my grandson's toy truck on the floor behind him. "Wait, please. It's just a small gift for..." The door slammed shut before I could finish. The sound echoed through my bones like a gunshot. My heart shattered in that moment. I had raised this boy, changed his diapers, stayed up all night when he had fevers. Now he looked at me like I was a stranger. As I stood there in shock, clutching that wrapped gift, I couldn't help but wonder if that would be the last time I'd ever see him. What was I supposed to do now? Was that really the end of everything? It was the silence that hurt the most. Not the door slamming, not even the coldness in his voice. It was the complete absence of my grandchildren's laughter that used to fill my Sundays. I spent sleepless nights thinking of every little thing I had done wrong, every sacrifice I had made to raise him right. I replayed his childhood in my mind like an old movie. The time he broke his arm and cried in my lap for hours. When he graduated college and thanked me in his speech. When he got married and asked me to dance at his wedding. Where had that boy gone? When did my son become a man who could look at me and turn away so easily? I asked myself over and over what happened to the child who used to run to me for comfort when he had nightmares. But as the silence stretched on for days, then weeks, I began to hear a different voice inside me. Was I going to just keep begging for crumbs of his attention? Was I going to stand at his door like some unwanted stranger for the rest of my life? Or was it time to take control of my own story? I wasn't sure if I could go on like this, but I knew one thing: I couldn't just let it end this way. Days turned into weeks without a single word from him. Birthdays came and went. School events happened without me. Christmas morning arrived, and I sat alone while somewhere across town, my grandchildren opened presents I would never see. My son didn't just refuse to let me see my grandkids, he actively erased me from their lives. His social media was full of pictures, birthday parties, first steps, bedtime stories. His children's laughter echoed in every post, while I was nowhere to be seen. Cut out like I had never existed. How could a son do this to his own mother? I felt invisible, like a ghost haunting my own life. I drove past their house sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of the children playing in the yard. The curtains were always drawn when my car appeared. But just as I was sinking into complete despair, I caught a glimpse of something in one of his posts. A family photo where my grandson was wearing the sweater I had knitted him last Christmas. The one I left on their doorstep when no one answered. That tiny glimpse was enough to spark an idea, something I could do to turn this around. But what would it cost me? I began to accept the new reality, or so I thought. Every time I called, the phone went straight to voicemail. Every text message disappeared into silence. I stopped buying birthday gifts. I stopped planning holiday visits that would never happen. But then I saw another photo that changed everything. My granddaughter was holding a birthday cake, and in the background, barely visible, was the family portrait that used to hang in my living room. The one with all of us together. He had taken it from my house months ago, claiming he wanted a copy made. Now I knew the truth. He hadn't just cut me out of their present, he was rewriting their past. My grandchildren would grow up thinking I didn't care about them. That I had abandoned them. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake, to make him see what he was doing. But instead, I just stood there in my empty house, staring at that photo. And slowly, carefully, I began to plot. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, I couldn't just let this go. A plan was forming in my mind, quiet and careful. Could my plan work, or would it just make things worse? I knew there had to be something I could do. Some way to make him feel the weight of his actions. I wasn't just going to sit in my house and fade away like he wanted me to. I didn't want to play the victim anymore. I wasn't just a mother in pain, I was a woman who had endured enough. For months, I had been begging for scraps of his attention. Pleading for phone calls that never came. Standing at his door like some desperate stranger. But I had something he didn't know about. Something he had never bothered to ask about or consider. My late husband had left me comfortable, and over the years, I had been careful with money. More careful than my son realized. My first step was simple, quietly updating my will. I made an appointment with my lawyer for the following week. But as I wrote down the appointment in my calendar, I couldn't help but wonder, would he even care about money? Or would he still see me as nothing but an inconvenience? The thought of signing those papers made my hands shake. Once I did this, there would be no taking it back. I had no idea how he would react, but I knew one thing. He was about to find out what happens when you mess with me. I didn't tell anyone about my decision. Not my sister, not my best friend from church, not even my neighbor who had watched this whole mess unfold. It was my secret, burning quiet and steady in my chest. I sat in my lawyer's office, hands steady as I signed each page. Everything I had earned over 40 years of work, everything my husband had left me, all of it was being redirected. My daughter would get the house. My church would get a generous donation. The children's hospital where my grandson had been born would receive a scholarship fund. My son's name, once written clearly in my old will, was now crossed out completely. No inheritance. No family photos. No grandmother's jewelry for his wife. Nothing. Are you certain about this, Mrs. Parker? My lawyer asked, sliding the papers across his desk. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I replied, signing my name with a firm hand. But as I handed the will back to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change forever. The moment he found out, would he beg for forgiveness, or would he try to tear it all apart? I had done it. The paperwork was filed, the signatures were dry, and my new will was official. But sitting in my car outside the lawyer's office, I still wasn't sure if it would work. Would it be enough to bring him to his senses? Or had I just made everything worse? Part of me felt guilty. This was still my son, the boy I had rocked to sleep and helped with homework. But another part of me felt something I hadn't experienced in months, power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had made a choice that mattered. I tried not to think about it too much as I drove home. I focused on simple things, grocery shopping, paying bills, watering my plants. Normal life continued while my secret plan waited in a lawyer's filing cabinet. There was a tiny spark of hope growing in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, this would open his eyes. Maybe he would realize that pushing me away had consequences he never considered. But what would happen when he found out? Would he come crawling back with apologies, or would he turn away forever? I couldn't wait forever for him to come around. How long before I got the call? The call came 3 weeks later, just as I was settling down with my evening tea. My son's name flashed on my phone screen, and my heart jumped. This was the first time he had called me in over 6 months. Mom, we need to talk. His voice was tight, controlled. No greeting, no pleasantries. Of course, honey. How are the children? Cut the act, he interrupted. I know what you did. So he had found out somehow. Perhaps his wife had been named in my old will and asked questions when she wasn't included in some legal document. It didn't matter how he knew. You think you can just shut me out like this? He yelled, his anger crackling through the phone. This is blackmail, Mom. Pure and simple blackmail. I didn't say a word. I let him talk, let him vent his fury while I sipped my tea calmly. I didn't need to defend my actions. I had already made my choice months ago when he slammed that door in my face. You're manipulative and cruel, he continued. I always knew you were selfish, but this. When he finally hung up, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of a real conversation, or the final nail in the coffin? After that phone call, everything fell silent again. The days dragged on with no more communication. I watched my phone, waiting for another message, a sign that he had heard me and understood what this was really about. But nothing came. My phone sat quiet on the kitchen counter while I went about my daily routines. I tended my garden, read my books, visited with my sister. Life continued, but underneath it all, I was waiting. His silence spoke louder than his angry words had. He wasn't calling to apologize or ask to see me. He wasn't begging to bring the grandchildren over. He was just angry about money. And yet, I couldn't help but feel that something was building beneath that silence. Like storm clouds gathering on a clear day, there was tension in the air that I couldn't name. I waited for a sign, but as days turned into weeks, I began to wonder, was he really going to let this go? Was he going to write me off completely and move on with his life? Or was something about to happen that would force him to act? What if his silence wasn't defeat, but just the calm before the storm? Then, one Tuesday morning, I got a letter in the mail. Official letterhead, legal language, my name spelled correctly in bold letters across the top. It wasn't from my son directly, but from his lawyer. The contents left me speechless. My son was contesting the will. He was claiming I was of unsound mind and unduly influenced by grief. The letter used words like incompetent and irrational to describe my decision to change my will. His words were full of legal venom, but beneath all that formal language, I could see something else, fear. He was afraid of losing money he had always assumed would be his. Money he had never earned, never asked about, never even thanked me for. The letter demanded a medical evaluation to prove my mental competency. It requested financial records going back 5 years. It suggested I had been manipulated by outside parties into making this decision. My hands shook as I read his lawyer's accusations. After months of ignoring me, now he wanted to drag me through court to prove I was crazy. Was this just the beginning of a long, ugly legal fight? Would this battle tear what was left of our family apart forever, or would it finally bring the truth to light? I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My son was fighting me with everything he had, hiring expensive lawyers and making wild accusations about my mental state. The bitterness between us deepened with each legal document that arrived in my mailbox. But I wasn't going to back down. I had learned over the years that sometimes, the only way to get someone's attention is to hit them where it hurts the most. And this was hurting him in ways I had never seen before. I hired my own lawyer, a sharp woman who specialized in family disputes. She reviewed my case and smiled grimly. "Your son doesn't have much of a legal leg to stand on," she told me. "But be prepared for this to get ugly." Slowly but surely, I could see the pressure breaking him down. His social media posts became less frequent. The family photos stopped appearing. Friends began asking me questions about what was really happening. He was learning that trying to publicly destroy his mother's reputation had consequences he hadn't considered. But would he break enough to come to his senses, or would this legal war drive him even further away from any chance of reconciliation? How far would I need to go to make him finally see the truth? Word of our legal battle spread through our small town like wildfire. Family members began taking sides. My daughter supported me completely, but my son's in-laws started a whisper campaign about my mental breakdown. Some people thought I was being too harsh. Others quietly admitted they understood why I had done it. But no one really grasped the depth of pain that had led me to this point. All they saw was a mother abandoning her son over money. My sister called me crying. "This is tearing our whole family apart," she said. "Can't you just forgive him and move on?" But forgiveness and moving on were two different things. I could forgive my son for hurting me, but that didn't mean I had to pretend it never happened. That didn't mean I had to reward his cruelty with inheritance money. The family dinners stopped. Holiday plans were canceled. Cousins chose sides and stopped speaking to each other. My decision had created a divide that reached far beyond just my son and me. As I watched decades of family relationships crumble, I had to ask myself, was this rift going to divide us forever, or was there still a chance for healing? Could this family ever come together again, or was it too late for all of us? The legal battle raged on for months. I spent countless hours in my lawyer's office, preparing documents and giving depositions. Each day brought new accusations from my son's legal team, new attempts to prove I was incompetent. They brought in doctors to evaluate my mental state. They questioned my neighbors about my behavior. They demanded bank records and medical files, trying to find any evidence that I wasn't capable of making my own decisions. But every test came back normal. Every evaluation proved I was mentally sharp and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Their case was falling apart, and everyone could see it. I felt the weight of this decision growing heavier with each court appearance. But I never wavered. I had chosen this path when my son chose to slam that door in my face, and I would see it through to the end. As the court date for final arguments approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen that would change everything. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, family, and what we owe each other as human beings. Was I prepared for whatever truth was about to come out in that courtroom? I sat in the courtroom, my son directly across from me for the first time in almost a year. His lawyer was making passionate arguments about my irrational behavior and obvious mental decline. I watched my son's face as the accusations flew. But then, something shifted. In the middle of his lawyer's speech about my incompetence, my son glanced at me. For just a moment, the coldness melted away. He looked tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with legal battles. His eyes were the same ones that used to look at me with love and trust. The same eyes that had cried when he scraped his knee as a child. For the first time in months, I saw the boy I had raised instead of the stranger who had replaced him. He looked away quickly, but that moment hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. When court adjourned for the day, he lingered while his lawyer packed up papers. We stood there in the empty courtroom, years of hurt and love tangled between us. Was this the turning point I had been waiting for? Was he finally ready to admit his mistakes, or was this just another moment of weakness that would disappear by morning? He didn't apologize, not with words. But something had changed in that courtroom moment. When I walked to my car, he followed me outside into the parking lot. "Mom," he said quietly, and just hearing him call me that again made my throat tight. We stood there by my car while lawyers and other families streamed past us. I could see him struggling with words he didn't know how to say. "I miss them," I said finally. "I miss my grandchildren." He nodded, looking at the ground. "They ask about you sometimes." It was the first crack in the wall he had built between us. We talked for 20 minutes in that parking lot, really talked, about the children, about his work, about small things that mattered. For a moment, it felt like we might find our way back to each other. But just when I thought we were making progress, he said something that stopped my heart, "But I'm still fighting the will. This isn't about the money, Mom. It's about what you did to hurt me." Would this be the end of our fragile truce? How could I handle this betrayal after everything we had just shared? A week after that courthouse conversation, my phone buzzed with a text message. My son's name on the screen made my pulse quicken. "Can we talk?" was all it said. My heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was he finally coming to me with a real apology? I stared at those 3 words for a long time before responding. "When?" I typed back. "Tonight. Your house." I spent the afternoon cleaning, cooking, preparing like he was a guest instead of my son. I made his favorite cookies, the ones I used to pack in his lunchbox. I wasn't sure what he wanted to say, but I wasn't going to rush into hope. He had made me wait for months to see him. He had forced me to fight legal battles just to prove I was sane. I had learned not to trust his gestures too quickly. When evening came and I heard his car in the driveway, my hands were shaking. I opened the door before he could knock. He looked nervous, uncertain, more like the son I remembered. Would this conversation change everything between us, or would it just reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal? Could I trust him enough to give him another chance? We sat in my living room, the same room where he had played with toy cars as a child. He looked around at the family photos I had never taken down, pictures of him, his children, all of us together in happier times. "I was wrong," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't much, but it was the first real admission he had made. I waited for him to continue, not wanting to rush this moment or scare him back into silence. I don't know why I shut you out, he continued. I was angry about something, and I took it out on you. Then it became easier to just keep you away than to explain myself. We spent the next 2 hours talking. Really talking for the first time in over a year. He told me about stress at work, problems in his marriage, fears about being a good father. I listened without judging, the way I used to when he was young. But just when I thought we were on the right path, he said something that made my stomach drop. I'm not sure I can ever forgive myself for what I did to you. His regret seemed genuine, but was it enough to fix what had been broken between us? Healing wasn't quick or simple. Every conversation after that felt like we were walking on broken glass, careful not to step wrong and shatter the fragile progress we were making. I let him see the damage his rejection had caused, the sleepless nights, the depression, the way I had started avoiding places where I might see happy families together. He started sharing his own pain too, the guilt that had been eating at him for months. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was understanding. We were both hurt people trying to find our way back to loving each other. His wife called me one afternoon. He's been miserable, she admitted. I kept telling him to call you, but he was too proud. Too ashamed of what he had done. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. I could see him trying to be the son I remembered, and he could see me trying to be the mother he needed. But as we took these careful steps forward, the question still lingered between us like a shadow. Was this foundation strong enough to hold our relationship together? Could we ever truly move past what had happened, or would this pain always be there under the surface? One Saturday afternoon, a knock on my door broke the quiet routine I had settled into. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. My grandchildren stood there, shy but eager, my granddaughter holding a drawing she had made for me. My son stood behind them, his eyes downcast but hopeful. They wanted to come see you, he said softly. They'd been asking about Grandma for weeks. I dropped to my knees and hugged them both, breathing in their sweet smell and feeling their small arms around my neck. My granddaughter's drawing was of our family, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. We missed you, Grandma, my grandson whispered into my ear. For the first time in over a year, my house was filled with children's laughter again. We baked cookies together, read stories, played games in the backyard. Normal grandmother things that had felt like impossible dreams just weeks before. But as wonderful as this day was, I couldn't shake a nagging worry. Was this the start of a real reconciliation, or just a temporary gesture? Could we rebuild our family from this foundation, or was this just a fleeting moment that would disappear again? Things were steadily improving between us. The legal battle was still ongoing, but my son had stopped pushing as aggressively. We were having regular dinners together, and I was seeing my grandchildren every weekend. I thought we had turned a corner. I believed we were finally healing. But then another bombshell dropped into my peaceful progress. My lawyer called on a Tuesday morning with news that made my blood run cold. Your son's legal team has filed new documents, she said. They're claiming your recent will was tampered with and that you were coerced by outside parties into changing it. The accusation was more serious than anything they had tried before. They were suggesting that someone had manipulated me, possibly even forged my signature. This wasn't just about my mental competency anymore, they were alleging criminal activity. My son's lawyer contacted me again, demanding to know who had influenced my decision. The legal battle wasn't over, it was escalating into something much more dangerous. As I sat there holding the court documents, I couldn't help but wonder, what was my son really after? Was this still about money, or had this become about winning at any cost? Was this legal fight going to be my breaking point? We were back in court, but this time felt different. The tension between my son and me was thick enough to cut. His new accusations had hurt me deeper than anything he had done before. His lawyer painted a picture of me as a vulnerable old woman, easily manipulated by greedy relatives or con artists. They suggested I had been pressured into changing my will against my better judgment. But my lawyer was ready. She presented months of evidence showing my mental competency, my independent decision-making, and my clear reasons for the change. Bank records proved no one else had access to my accounts. Phone records showed I had made all the calls to legal offices myself. The judge listened to both sides, then made his ruling. My will would stand as written. My decision to exclude my son was legally valid and would remain in effect. I had won. The legal battle was over. But as I looked across the courtroom at my son's devastated face, I felt no victory. Just sadness for everything we had lost in this fight. Just when I thought it was all over, I saw something in my son's eyes that told me there might be one more surprise coming. Had I really won, or was there one final twist waiting for me? After the court case ended, something unexpected happened. Instead of walking away in defeat, my son approached me in the courthouse hallway. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, and this time I could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Not about the money. I'm sorry for cutting you out of our lives. For hurting you the way I did." It was the first time he had truly acknowledged his actions without legal pressure or ulterior motives. "I want to try again," he continued. "Not because of inheritance or wills or any of that. Just because I miss having you as my mother." We started over slowly, carefully. Family dinners became regular again. I helped with homework and school projects. I attended soccer games and dance recitals. We began building new memories on top of the painful ones. But even as we worked to rebuild our relationship, I couldn't shake a lingering doubt. After everything we had been through, after all the legal battles and hurtful words, I had to ask myself, was this apology genuine? Was he truly sorry for what he had done, or was he just trying to work his way back into my good graces for future benefits? Was he sincere, or was this just another attempt to regain control? It took time, but gradually our family found its new rhythm. My son and I never pretended the past year hadn't happened, but we learned to build something new on top of the ruins. My grandchildren were the bridge between us. Their innocent love and forgiveness helped heal wounds that adult pride had kept open too long. They didn't care about wills or legal battles, they just wanted their grandma back. My son changed too. He became more grateful, more aware of how precious family relationships really are. The legal battle had taught him that nothing is guaranteed, not even a mother's love. I kept my will exactly as I had rewritten it. Not out of spite, but because I had learned something important about myself during this whole ordeal. I was worth more than being taken for granted. As I watched my family laugh together around my dinner table, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. We had found our way back to loving each other, but on new terms that honored everyone's worth. But as I looked at my grandchildren's faces, glowing with happiness, I couldn't help but wonder about the future. Was this new beginning strong enough to last? Was this the new beginning we had all hoped for, or would old patterns eventually resurface? Years passed, and our family remained strong. My son proved his change was real through consistent actions, not just words. He never asked about the will again. He never demanded anything from me except the relationship we had rebuilt together. One day, as we sat watching my granddaughter's school play, he asked me a question that had clearly been weighing on his mind. "What would you have done if I hadn't reached out after the court case?" he asked quietly. "If I had just walked away completely?" I thought about it for a long moment, watching my granddaughter on stage, remembering all the pain we had worked through to get to this point. "I would have let you go," I said honestly. "And I would have been just fine." It was the truth, but as I said those words, I wondered if that was really how I felt. Or if, despite everything, I had been holding on to hope longer than I wanted to admit. Had I truly been prepared to lose him forever? Or had some part of me always believed we would find our way back to each other? Was that really the truth, or just the final story I had told myself to make peace with an impossible choice? As I sit here now, with my grandchildren playing in my backyard and my son helping me tend my garden, I know I made the right choice. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty, but sometimes love requires tough decisions. My son learned that family relationships aren't guaranteed. That treating people poorly has consequences, even when those people love you unconditionally. He discovered that a mother's love doesn't mean accepting any treatment without boundaries. I learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined. That I could survive being rejected by my own child and come out the other side whole. That standing up for myself didn't make me cruel, it made me human. The will remains unchanged to this day. Not because I don't love my son, but because some lessons need permanent reminders. Family isn't about what you inherit from someone, it's about the love and respect you choose to give each other every day. We built something new from the ashes of what we lost. Something honest and real and unafraid. But as I watch my family now, healthy and whole and grateful for each other, I know this story isn't really over. Every day we choose to love each other well is a new chapter. Was this truly the end of our painful journey, or just the beginning of something better than we had ever dared to hope for?